Hello there, I'm Carmelo from Nick and Mello's Hyperspace. You know what that means. It means like our videos, if you like our videos. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you can be notified every time we upload a program. May the force be with you. You are now entering Nick and Mello's Hyperspace.
Hey, I'm Nick, and my favorite bounty hunter is Cad Bane.
And I'm Carmelo, and I don't really have a bounty hunter, a favorite bounty hunter, because they scare me. They're really scary.
In our journeys through hyperspace, we examine everything and anything Star Wars from a point of view of two lifelong fans, one young and one old, who came together through the will of the Force.
In this episode, we're going to be talking about bounty hunters, but we are talking about a very specific narrative arc that is pretty recent. And it's a series of comics. Oh, there we go. War of the Bounty Hunters by Charles Soule. It is sort of a standalone 5-6 comic series. And then it sort of branches out into all sorts of other of the other stories that are happening right now. But we really love the series, and we wanted to, in a way, sort of celebrate the broadcasting of the Book of Boba Fett and bounty hunting land by having an episode now in the new year. Happy New Year, everybody!
Hey.
About bounty hunting in itself, and this specific comic. And so Nick and I would like to sort of start talking about bounty hunters in general, and then we'll slowly get into that comic itself. Be aware that there might be some spoilers. We're not going to tell you everything, but we got to tell you a few things so we can actually have a conversation about the comic series.
So I was told one time that bounty hunting is a complicated profession.
I've heard that before.
I have heard that, and I think it sounds complicated. Something I wouldn't want to do, but it's cool.
Maybe we should call this podcast "The Complicating Profession of Bounty Hunting."
Would be a good ring to it.
Yeah. It does.
You said you didn't really have a favorite bounty hunter, and they're kind of scary. Has bounty hunting that side of Star Wars? Is that like a?
Have
you ever been interested into it?
You know, it is really interesting when you approached me to do this podcast. I was very intrigued because it is a major part of Star Wars, but it is always, for me, it's always been in the margins for me. It is not, bounty hunting is not why I love Star Wars, but I sort of recognize how important narratively bounty hunters are. It's really interesting how, we have the sort of ever-present tension between the Jedi and the Sith. But in a way, these both groups are very similar in the way that they have a very clear code and that they have this sort of passion, almost obsession with the notion of the Force. Bounty hunters are not part of that. And so in a way, the bounty hunter is sort of, I'm going to say something funny. I think bounty hunters save us from the obsession of the Force in Star Wars. And that they sort of give us a different aspect of the galaxy that is just as real as the Sith and the Jedi, but with a very different narrative, with very different characters, and of course, literally with a very different morality. And so I said yes to this because I think it's a really interesting phenomena in Star Wars, and I think the Book of Boba Fett, in a way, is sort of both informed and inspired by let's give more space to bounty hunting itself in live action television.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I think that's what everybody knows Star Wars for, is the Force, that spiritual, mystical, ever-present thing that's always there.
Right.
And then bounty hunters feel like a very grounded, in a way, like approach. It's kind of more of a, I wouldn't say relatable, but like you could probably see yourself being a bounty hunter before Jedi. They're both very complicated to get into, but being a Jedi would be, very few get to do that. Bounty hunting is ever present. It's kind of a look into the everyday lives of people. And in a way, because usually, the Jedi, they're on Coruscant. They're in the biggest, richest planet in the galaxy. Bounty hunters, they're in the backwaters. They're in the small planets. They're just trying to make a living. And they don't really see Jedi often. They're kind of in their own little space in the galaxy. They cross over, obviously, but they're kind of in their own little world within a larger world.
And I like, from the way that you're talking about it, a word popped up in my head. Bounty hunters are about precarious living in the galaxy. This is about making ends meet, or about barely making ends meet. And it's really interesting. I like how you talked about bounty hunters sort of very, very grounded on the floor, on sort of like reality and sort of the gravity of life, literally. Yeah. And I think one of the interesting things about bounty hunters is that they reveal the precariousness of life in the galaxy. I think I have a very good point that the Jedi, in a way, are privileged subjects. In a way, the bounty hunters are not. And that makes them very real. And that makes them, in a way, less scary. Even though I find them scary, they're a little less scary when you think about that. When you think about sort of the social reality connected to the story of who these people are.
Yeah, I kind of want to relate it to a real world issue with like crime. And,
of course.
Crime is not just something somebody wakes up and just decides I'm going to be a criminal or I'm going to do illegal things. It's usually bred out of necessity or the lack of resources. So, people don't have enough to provide for themselves or their families. They don't have enough to make ends meet. So they have to do things that you wouldn't advise people doing. They have to cross that line. And we see that with bounty hunters all the time. They're very like strict to their, I have a job to do. I was paid to do this. I'm going to do it. So yeah, that's kind of a real world connection I've always made with bounty hunting.
That's true. That's very true. I've always found it interesting that many times bounty hunters are always seen as baddies, as bad guys in Star Wars. But it's really interesting, both in Clone Wars, when we start sort of getting to know Asajj, when Asajj sort of becomes a bounty hunter for a minute, that we know who this character is, and her entering that space for her is a transitional space. It's not something that she does all the time, but for many characters, it's what they do. There was another podcast that you mentioned that just like the Jedi have a code, the bounty hunters have a code. And so it's not like it's not anarchy. It's not a space of sort of disorganization. It is actually very centralized. There are guilds. There are crime organizations. And so this is not a free for all. And so it's really interesting that Star Wars sort of recognizes a code in the world of bounty hunters. In the shows, especially in the shows, and in some of the novels as well. I haven't read too many novels about bounty hunters. I know they exist, but I have not read them. But the little bit that you get here and there, that notion of the code is very clear, very, very clear.
Yeah, it's like a unspoken agreement. Like they understand, like I said earlier, that's a job they have to do, that they were paid to do. And we see all the time where like a couple bounty hunters may be on opposite sides of whatever conflict's going on, and then later on they meet up and there's no hard feelings, it was a job, and they're usually like, yeah, that's fine, I get it. They're not like holding a grudge. They're like, yeah, I understand.
Some of them do.
Most of the time. But I always found that fascinating when that does happen. I'm like, they're just okay with that, even though I tried to kill him last time they saw each other. Like he's okay with it. He's like,
yeah. Dr. Afra has a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Of sort of like, we're moving on. She's like a savage capitalist. There's something very sort of like scary capitalism at work with her. It's sort of like, this is not good for business, so I'm moving on.
Yeah.
And so that's really very interesting. Shall we talk about the comic?
Yeah, let's do it.
I thank you for recommending this to me. Nick is he's my comics dealer. He's like, oh, you gotta read this. Oh, you gotta read this. Oh, you gotta read that. And of course, he's not giving me the salary to pay for all these comics, but
I don't know.
that's a different story. I think I probably earn more money than you do right now, so I can spend the money.
I would hope.
But one of the things that I loved about this comic, Nick, was number one, how quickly the action is. It's not one of these comics where we are sort of slowly simmering onto something. This thing starts from the get-go. And I love that. It was just, I mean, I read it so quickly. Because it was so much fun to sort of see the trajectory of all the misadventures of Boba Fett.
You want to tell just everybody listening, just kind of a brief summary of what it's about?
I will make it like a 2-3 sentence kind of thing.
Okay.
The War of the Bounty Hunters is occurring right after Empire Strikes Back. And the whole series that Marvel Comics is issuing right now are happening between Empire and Return of the Jedi. And so Star Wars has a series like that. The Bounty Hunter series has a series like that. And then this is sort of a standalone story of 6 comics, right? There's like a 0, and then
so 6 main issues of the story.
6 main issues of it. So it's usually a little thicker as a graphic novel than it usually is. But it's worth every page. It's worth every coloring ink. It's just really, really marvelous. And it's sort of the adventures of Boba Fett trying to keep Han Solo in Carbonite with him. And the entire bounty hunting world trying to say, wait a minute, we want Han Solo too. And so it's all of the adventures and misadventures of bounty hunting of Boba Fett trying to keep it with him. Are you showing the different images? Oh, because you have the individual ones. Okay, because he's a real comics fan. I wait for this.
He waits 6 months for the story. I had to get it immediately, but
I remember when I started reading Star Wars comics, thanks to Mr. Bloop here. I bought like the first High Republic one, and I read it, and I'm like, "Fuck, it's over." It's like I read it in 7 minutes, and I'm like, no, because I'm so used to reading the graphic novels where there's like a series of them, so there's a little bit of momentum, but it's sort of like it's like the quickest fuck, and it's just not as satisfying. It really isn't.
That's the fun of comics. It's a slow burn, but it's fun. I love it.
I think it's a quick burn, and then you got to wait a month for the next one.
the wait. That's the fun part. You got to wait.
No, I'm not good at waiting. I'm not good at waiting. No.
It's okay.
Instant gratification.
Before we start talking more about this,
sure.
I wanted to shout out the artist on this that I absolutely love. He's one of my favorites. Star Wars. I don't know much of his other work, but he's done some Star Wars in the past. I know his name, and I just forgot. Ross is his last name. Luke Ross. I'm sorry. Luke Ross is his name.
Yes.
Yes, he's the artist on the main bounty hunter story. I think he does 5 out of the 6 issues.
Wow.
And I just love his art. It's really very simplistic, very colorful. You'd expect from a bounty hunter story, but it's cool. I just love it. It's really, really fun. I just like to highlight artists. We talk a lot about writers on the show, but
true.
Highlight some art. Yeah.
True. No, that's true. You know, we've talked about this before, how sometimes the artists change in a long story, and there's this sort of like jarring change from one artist to another. It was really nice that comics 1 through 5 that were all done by the same team. Yeah. So there was a uniformity to it. And I'm a huge fan of Charles Soule, who did this series, who's the writer, and since the Darth Vader series from 2015, 2016, I have been a huge fan. And I actually met him. Oh my God.
Jealous. I'm very jealous.
And he remembered my name, which is just I was just in tears. It was really awesome. And so it's a bombastic, wonderful combination. The art, the coloring, the design, and the storytelling is just really, really fun. Sometimes in Star Wars comics, when they're sort of like trying to tell the story of something that happened, or like how did we get to this point, sometimes the stories feel a little sort of like, okay, so what do we say now? I loved how the series really had fun with Boba Fett trying to keep Han Solo with him as the bounty that he needed to take to Jabba the Hutt. It felt very sort of as realistic as Star Wars can be. It felt very realistic. And I really like the way Boba Fett is portrayed here, because there is a ruthlessness to him. While at the same time following this sort of code, this sort of bounty hunting code of sort of like, this is what I was paid to do and I need to do it. And so I found it really exciting to get a story that we didn't have before, but at the same time that it felt very sort of true to the tone. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It sort of felt true to the tone of bounty hunting in a way that I don't always feel works as well with at least with recent Star Wars comics. I haven't read all of them, but I've read enough of them that I sort of have a sense.
I think it does a cool job of giving us a fun story. Ultimately, I think we all know where the story ends. Like Han Solo's in, spoiler alert if you haven't seen Return of the Jedi, Han Solo is he's with Jabba the Hutt when they go to save him in his palace, and so we know Boba Fett gets in there. It's just, I think when it gives me a little context when I watch the movie now, like Boba Fett had to go through a lot to just get in there. It was a lot of BS. Let's say that.
Well, and I think most fans assumed that at the end of Empire, Boba Fett hops on his ship, he goes to Tatooine and delivers Han Solo to Jabba, which that's one plot. But I really love that they sort of made it into this
massive
galactic enterprise. I really, the spoiler alert, I really like that Boba Fett becomes hunted by bounty hunters.
Yeah,
I thought that was just
idea.
Brilliant. That was just brilliant in the way that it was done.
Yeah, you get to see a lot of fan favorites. You know, Dengar, Boss, Forlum, Zuckuss, Valance. I'm sorry, the newer bounty hunter character, and
Valance or Valance, whatever. But yeah. We got the Puerto Rican version and the Southern version. So you guys choose. You guys choose. Well, and Kira's in here.
Big spoiler, but yeah,
so
Kira.
It's really fun to have her there.
Big return for Crimson Dawn too, who we didn't really know what happened to them after Solo, so that was a fun connection. You didn't read these issue by issue. You waited until the collection came out. So I remember they did the Prelude, which is the little alpha issue,
right?
The first issue that's kind of setting the stage, shows you what happens, how he loses Han Solo, and then you don't really need to read this, but it gives you some context. And then the first issue is, of course, issue 1, and that's just kind of showing where Boba Fett goes, how the story goes. And in this one is the one where they reveal Kira, she's back. Of course, we didn't know her fate up until that, and it was when that came out, it was big. It was like all the Star Wars fans that kept up with the comics were excited because we never knew if we'd see that character again. So it was fun for her to pop up.
So when she shows up in that comics, they hadn't even announced that they were going to be doing a Crimson Dawn comic series, correct?
Yeah.
Crimson Rain. Is that what it's called?
Rain, the current one that's going on. Yeah, no, they didn't announce that until I think right before this one ended.
Cool.
It was a very big surprise, and I think they were kind of hush hush about it, and I think that's fun. I mean, that was something nobody was expecting. So,
it's been interesting in many of our conversations, Nick. We talk about this whole idea that there are some fans that not until it shows up on live action is it really real.
Mm.
And one of the things that I have loved about this series was how fun it was to have something that works so well in comics, told so well in comics, and fits so well between the two movies.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciated how fun it was to use the format of comics, the genre of comics, to tell this story. And it's like, I don't need it in any other format. I got it. It's here.
Yeah.
And if I want to read it again, it's right here.
There. Yeah.
And so there was something really fun about sort of getting the story and bringing in all of these little elements of Star Wars into it, and sort of make Boba Fett sort of the center of all of this,
And this came out, for those of you who don't know, it came out this past summer of 2021. So this was kind of the big summer Marvel Comics event, and it was all the Star Wars titles like Carmelo mentioned earlier, with Star Wars Bounty Hunters, Darth Vader, Dr. Aphra. They all circulated around this story. We get to see points of view of what those characters were doing, and they all kind of cross over at some point in the story. So it felt like a big unifying story, and have Boba Fett at the center. Of course, with the book of Boba Fett on the way, I assume that was intentional. And it's just cool. It was kind of the year of Boba Fett, I guess you could say.
Yeah, in a way, yes, that's true.
Yeah.
And we're going to be doing another podcast when the book of Boba Fett is over, so we can talk about the whole show. But it's been very interesting watching the first few episodes of that show while reading this.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not gonna talk too much about the television show, but it's been very interesting sort of seeing the way Boba is characterized in these comics versus the way that he's being characterized in the show. And so that's our little sort of like, if you want to know more, come and join us for the next one, because it's different. It really is different. I think. And I think it's worth a really interesting conversation about the way that comics are dealing with Boba Fett and the way that television is dealing with Boba Fett. And I see some really big contrasts between them. So it'll be an interesting thing. I don't know where the show is going. It's not over yet. So we are going to refrain from saying anything until the whole season is over, and then we can sort of have the whole context. So
I think as we wrapping up, like I really appreciated how they put, like I said, Boba Fett at the center. And like I said, I assume that's intentional, but just the way that the story to me was very good. It was at times a little predictable, but it was so effective that you didn't really care. It was still engaging. You still had fun with it. There's a few twists and turns, but the main characters, the main players, Boba Fett, we know where he ends up. Chewbacca, Leia, Lando, Luke, we all know where they end up. So
right.
But there's other characters that we don't really see after Empire, or they don't show up in the original trilogy because they're created after. It's fun to see how they interact and where their stories go. And I really appreciate that attention to detail. It's fun.
It is fun. It is fun, and I love the intersections, all the intersections of the different Star Wars stories that got sort of inserted into this series. I thought it was fun. Lots of fun. Great. So we highly recommend it. We highly recommend it.
Show off a couple more covers I got. It's a Boosh.
Oh yes.
Yeah, the bounty hunter that Leia obviously disguises as in the future.
Right.
These are all one shots. They were just kind of one-off stories that took place at the same time. They're fun little reads. You don't really have to read the main story to get these, but they're fun. Interesting. That's Forlum Zuckuss, the characters that Carmelo didn't know who they were. He said, "Who are these people?" He had pins.
I got a pin from Star Wars Celebration, and I'm like, "And who is that? I have no idea." And he's like, oh yeah, he's like that, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay.
And then a fun one. I recommend this a lot because this is kind of if you like IG-88.
I like that one. I like that one a lot.
It's a very simple story, and it's kind of I don't know what's going to happen to IG-88 because he's obviously not in The Mandalorian or Book of Boba Fett as of right now. So maybe this is kind of like an ending, possibly. We'll see.
We'll see.
It was a fun one. And then the last one, this is a character that kind of crossed over in all 4 of these issues. This is the Jabba the Hutt issue, but it's a little variant of like some promo, or I guess concept art of a new character that was introduced.
I have another variant for that one that just has, it's just so hard to do. There we go.
Which is funny because Jabba the Hutt is not in it a whole lot, but
no,
I mean he's kind of the central of the story. He pushes the plot forward, I guess. But
correct. Correct.
It's funny how they advertise it as Jabba the Hutt, but he's not really in it.
I know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Nicholas.
Yeah.
Wow, I've never called you Nicholas before.
Go pick up these at your local comic shop. Support your local comic shops. Yeah. I'm sure you can find them. There's a ton of them out there. They're very fun.
And one of the things that I have enjoyed, especially when I was writing my book, and then when developing my friendship with Nick, is sort of discovering this really wonderful world of comics and having the different writers doing different things with it. It's been really fun. It's been really fun. There are some jewels. There really are some jewels. Not everything is good, but not everything in everything is good. But the good stuff is really good. It's really good.
It's a high.
Homework.
We'll have
Star Wars comics.
I was gonna say we'll have to future episodes. We will have to dive into some more different.
Oh yeah, we will.
Comics.
Absolutely.
We have some fun ones coming up. So
absolutely. All right.
Till next time.
We'll see you soon. Bye.